All right. Atrim Regina Blue asked, I always wondered why did they cut out the beginning of season 2, episode 1 in TWD, where they go and revisit the Vatos? I think in a different video you were saying how wherever TF goes, they end up leaving death and destruction behind, and this is no exception. It has some character development and also gets Daryl and also Daryl gets to one up Andrea about being observant. Yeah, I know, I like that part. That part always makes me laugh. So if you don't know what she's talking about, there is a deleted scene. I think you can find it on YouTube from season 2. After the CDC blows up, they go back to try and find the Vatos gang, and they've all been wiped out. Someone came through and brutally murdered them all. And there's just kind of a funny, sarcastic exchange between Daryl and Andrea. I also recently found out that the gun bag Rick left with them is in the governor's office and he uses it too. Oh, I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that before. It's maybe not too obvious since I had to read about it, but it really solidifies the governor's brutality. Yeah. He must have found Merle around this time. Do you think if Daryl had found Merle instead, they would have taken off and left the group? I hope he would still find Beth in that parallel universe. Negan was annoying as anything, but I still think the governor was the most scary villain. So that's super interesting. So that just means that's kind of confirmation that the governor wiped out the Vatos gang. That's what you're saying. And that does make sense because we saw the governor wipe out the military guys and the choppers, right? Which is kind of what he was doing. He was going around killing people. And yeah, like you said, that was his MO. Good old governor. So I mean, obviously, I don't know if Daryl had found Merle instead. It just depends on probably when he found him, because I think after the events of season 2, Daryl was pretty firmly entrenched, as Rick's friend. You know what I mean? I don't think he would have been as willing to leave at that point. If he'd found them before Herschel's farm, then maybe Merle would have been able to convince him to leave. But I mean, at that point, we saw him almost willing to leave in season 3, but even then he was reluctant. And at the very least, he wouldn't have wanted to harm anybody in the group because we learned in well, where did we learn that? We learned at some point that him and Merle were going to steal everything from the group that was at the rock quarry. But by the time season 2 rolls around, I think he knew them too well and wouldn't have been willing to do that anymore. So it would have been interesting alternate universe to think about. But this also it's a good example. Again, I keep coming back to the confirmation bias we talked about earlier in the week. Um, it's a good example of something that is not Beth related, where we can see that they've put in clues. Okay. They did not tell us outright that the governor wiped out the Vatos gang, but they put in these little tiny clues that you have to look really hard for in order to find. And I think if there's not enough chatter about it online, then a lot of times they'll tell us in a roundabout way by posting or something. But you know, if we built this into a whole conspiracy theory about how the governors wiped out the Vatos gang, there's probably some people that are going to be like, "You're crazy! Like they never said that. You're just thinking that." And maybe they just used the same prop. That's what people would say. But the writers like Gimple and Nicotero have told us that they do this, and they've encouraged us to look for these clues. So this is a really good example of another time they've done this that has nothing to do with Beth. But if they did it here, then they would have done it with Beth too. Um, yeah, let's see. Did I answer everything? Do you think if Daryl had found Merle instead, they would have taken off and left the group? I hope he would still find Beth. Well, I mean, all I would say about that is that from a literary perspective, if they're meant to be soulmates, they will find each other somehow. I may be a big softie, but that's how I feel about it. And I don't know, to some extent, even though it's really fun to write, to think about it and to write AU fan fiction about it and all of that, I don't think it's almost like, what's the expression I'm looking for? It doesn't really matter. It's neither here nor there because either way, the writers were going to have Daryl be involved in the group. So I don't think that ever would have happened. But it is interesting to think how things might have been different if he had found Merle instead of the governor finding Merle. Um, but okay, so sorry guys, I'm spitballing and thinking about this. Part of the reason that they would have had the governor be the one to find Merle is because it's a really fascinating dynamic to have people who care about each other on opposite sides of a conflict. Um, So finding Merle with an enemy group, that's not something that's even like The Walking Dead didn't think that up, right? um, that's a really interesting dynamic because it forces you to stop and say, okay, if this person who I know is a good person or someone I care about is with this group, then they must have good elements about them. There must be a reason they're with them. Um, and it just forces you to look at things from a different perspective. And of course, there's a lot of inherent drama and angst and all of that conflict, the stuff good fiction is made of. So that's why they did that. But we also think that they are going to maybe find Beth with a, quote unquote bad or enemy group. So this is also maybe a little bit of a template for something that's coming up. We have found parallels between Beth and Merle before, and it's mostly this. It's mostly him disappearing. And he wasn't necessarily presumed dead, but he cut his hand off, so he was hurt. I mean, it's similar. And they looked for him, they couldn't find him, they had no idea where he went, and then he popped up later with an enemy group. That's very much what we think will happen with Beth. So really interesting. Thanks for bringing this up because I had never heard that before, that the gun bag Rick left the Vatos gang was in the governor's office. That's actually kind of a super cool detail. So thanks for sending that in. I hope that helps. Next one, Obadala 2. This picture was posted to an official TWD account promoting Daryl Dixon season 3. Just thought it was interesting that it's comparing DDS3 to The Ones Who Live. Ooh, interesting. Survival is only the first step. First you survive. What happened? Then you start living again. Okay, I got to think about that for a minute. Okay, I'll come back to that and give you my thoughts. Also, that you can see in the background of Carol's picture that she's at dinner with the guy we see briefly in the teaser trailer that looks like there might be some romance there between him and Carol. I really hope this is the case so Carol will have a new love interest with Daryl there, just to hammer home again that their connection is not romantic. Unless, of course, this new romantic partner will just serve to make Daryl realize his long-buried feelings for Carol. Let's not go down that road. Again, I really don't think this is going to be a Carol romance. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But it's interesting that you say, I mean, I guess I'm not even, the way that you put that, I mean, they could use it in a romantic sense without it actually being a romance. Like what I mean is, I've said before that I do think Carol is going to go back to Ezekiel. So I could see them doing something where, okay, maybe this guy is interested in her romantically. And I'm not saying that I think it's actually going to be a romance for her or that this is going to be a love interest, but maybe they use it to hammer home, to use your words, that she has someone waiting for her somewhere else that she needs to go find, something like that. That I could see. So when I look at this picture, I mean, they're actually not equating Daryl with Rick here, but that may not matter. So if we take what they're putting here, survival is only the first step. First you survive what happened, then you start living again. Okay, wow, I could go a lot of directions with this, you guys. Number one, it actually brings me back to Rick's speech in 510, Them, who said, he was about his grandfather at war and how you have to survive first and later you get to live. So we could connect it to that, which is also connected to Beth through the music box in that episode, kind of a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of thing. But really, if they're saying this is what happened with Rick in The Ones Who Live, he is surviving inside an enemy group, and he did have to survive first, and only then did he get to start living later, right? And they're saying that this is going to be the case with Daryl and Carol, specifically Carol, because she's in the picture. But yeah, I mean, Daryl and Carol in the first 5 minutes of the first episode that got released, I mean, they're talking about this. This is no way to live. We're always running. We're always fighting. So if they survived, and even thinking about that comment from the one about Rick's brother, they said that Zabel said there would be a 4 season arc. The first 2 were in France. The second 2 will be in Spain. So could you see it as the first 2 seasons are about surviving and the second 2 are about living? Like that makes sense to me, especially with how the end of season 2, what happened there, that they both were hallucinating and, the bat guano and everything. That felt like a real turning point. Okay, so you guys, I actually teach fiction writing and I teach The turning point of the story, which usually comes right at the midpoint, right at the middle, it's something that I really get up on my soapbox and harp about because so many writers don't have any idea what it is. Everybody knows, what the inciting incident is and the rising action and the climactic moment and all of that, but half the writers out there who are publishing do not know what the turning point is. The turning point or the midpoint, it has different names depending on what writing system you're using, is usually right in the middle, and it's where the characters go from a place of reaction to a place of action. So the first half of the story, they are reacting to what's going on, to what's happening with them. They're very often running, hiding, fighting, but they don't know what's going on or why this is happening to them. They're like trying to keep their heads above water and they're just reacting and other things around them are acting upon them, right? And then when they hit the midpoint, this is usually when they get more information, they finally understand what's going on, why this is happening to them, and they sort of hatch a plan to intentionally go after what they want. And so the second part of the story then is them actively trying to reach, whatever their story goals are. So they go from a place of reaction to a place of intentional action. And if you look at what Zabel said about the 4-season arc, you can see that the first part was them surviving. The second part is them moving toward living. They're intentionally trying to get home now, right? But living for Daryl, I mean, it's got to involve Beth, right? It's got to involve, because surviving, if you think about a romantic relationship, that doesn't fall under survival. Survival is just doing what you got to do to stay alive. To have the luxury of a romantic relationship is not survival, that's living, right? So I'm thinking that in the third and fourth season, I think that we're going to see Beth, but there's going to be a big emphasis too on the living part, right? Not just the surviving part. And anyway, then there's the more obvious thing that I think you were going for when you sent this in. I kind of went off on my own little tangent there. But that Rick found his soulmate, right? And so the ones who live were about him coming back together with Michonne, who's his soulmate. And like I said, they're showing Carol here, and so I think that could be leading toward her realizing Ezekiel is her soulmate, and maybe she does want to go back with him and be happy with him, especially now that she's found Daryl. She'll drag Daryl back with her too. It's not like she's changed her mind or anything, but they don't show Daryl here, but it would be more relevant to him given how much we've seen about his happy ending and him looking for somebody and him pursuing a relationship with Isabel and all of that. But I also think that if they had put Daryl here next to Rick, it would almost be too obvious that they're heading toward his soulmate. You know what I mean? Like, so they're like, oh, we won't do that. We'll put Carol there. Just so we're not being quite as obvious. So yeah, thanks for sending this in. This is really fun. And I certainly am never going to see the Instagrams that are not the American ones. So, oh, you say this is an official. I was thinking that this was from a different country, but maybe not. Anyway, thanks for sending this in. This is super fun. And I could probably go a lot more into this, but I will not. Okay, on to the next one. Thank you so much. Hey, I'm new to TD and have for the past few days been listening to your videos about Beth, and I'm officially on board with her being alive. Yay! Rogue Ostrich, I just noticed your username. That's a different one. It's fun. My question is, when do you think EK and Norman became aware of this? Did they always know Beth's death was a fake out, or do you think it's a more recent discovery now that they're probably filming together again? I figured they, or at least Emily, had always known, but she cried after Beth was killed off, so I was wondering, what do you think? I think that they've both known since at least before season 5. And the main reason for that is that they always did this thing on the flagship show. They probably still do it, but they don't talk about it as much anymore, or publicize it as much since they switched to spin-offs. But they always did this thing where all of the main characters would go in and have a sit down with Gimple and the other writers. And a lot of times the actors would post on their social media that they had just had their sit down with the writers, and they were super excited for filming the next season. So they always did this before the filming started for the season. And basically what they told us is that the writers would tell them where their character's arc was going this season. So this is another reason why it just simply cannot be that they decided in 507 that they were killing Beth off in 508. Like, that's what they have tried to tell us happened. And I mean, to be fair, they didn't actually say that. Like, the writers didn't actually say that. Emily said that she learned in episode 7 that she was dying in episode 8, which is not exactly the same thing. And I think she was lying about that anyway. But when she did her sit down with the writers at the beginning of season 5, she did post, and it's kind of a famous picture. I've posted it a few times. She took a picture with all the writers, and there are some that are not as big, but both Gimple and Kang were there. And Gimple is looking like he's got his hand on his jaw, like he's thinking, like rubbing his jaw and thinking really hard. And he's got this expression on his face, like something's a mystery. And Emily's super happy. She's like super excited and posing. And I'm assuming it's because they told her she was going to get her own episode and that this was happening. But I don't think it doesn't make sense that they would have told her that she was dying. And it doesn't make sense that if they didn't tell her that they would have decided to kill her off mid-season. Like they already had the whole season planned out and they told her what was happening. I don't think she would have been that happy if she knew that she was getting killed off mid-season. I think she was happy because they told her the full story at that point. I'll go into this in a minute. I do think that it's possible they knew some things before, but I don't think she knew the full extent of it until they were getting ready to film season 5. But this is where they told her, okay, we are gonna, quote unquote, kill you off in the mid-season finale. You're gonna be gone for a few seasons, but you are gonna be Daryl's love interest. You are going to come back. We've got this whole arc planned with this serious symbolism. It's gonna be huge. And I think that's why she was so excited. Um, and that's why Gimple had the look and everything. So I think that she knew about it at least from there. And I do think all of the other actors knew about it too. The one thing that I always cite, I mean, there's plenty of evidence that other actors know what's going on. Like you say, I'm positive Norman knows and has known at least since the same time, since season 5. I mean, just the fact that he does a lot of TD symbols and drops TD hints, and the one that jumps out to me about that he said specifically from that time period is that the whole story about how he wanted to look exhausted, so he sat on an apple crate and cried before they filmed that final scene. The apple symbolism, like why would there be an apple crate on set, and why would he need to specifically mention it? You know what I mean? Like to me, that was an intentional story being told. Anyway, um, but in terms of the other characters, Andrew Lincoln had an interview that he gave. I want to say that they first aired it in the Talking Dead after Coda. It was right around it was talking about Emily. And he was saying, no, she's so great. And I'm paraphrasing here, of course. And she's such a wonderful actress and we love her so much. And he's like, and she deserved this ending. She deserves this. The thing is, his tone sounds really sweet. Like he's paying her a compliment, but to say she deserved that ending is kind of mean. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't think that's what he was saying. I think he knows about the return. And that's why he's saying she's such a great person. She deserves to have this arc. It's a really great thing. And she totally deserves to be the center of the storyline, right? Anyway, so I think all of the main characters knew about it and know about it, and all of them are totally in on it. It's possible some of the side characters who have come and gone didn't know. I think a lot of them still might, but it's possible that a lot of them didn't because they just didn't really need to and had absolutely no interaction with her arc at all. It is possible they knew something before then, because even at the end of season 5, even at the end of season 4, there were some interviews given that were a little bit suspect. The one where Emily said that she and Norman watched, I think it was supposed to be, they watched Alone together. And, when Beth gets kidnapped and Emily turned to Norman and said, what do you think is going to happen, And he answered and said, "Oh," like he was goofing around. They told the story like he was teasing her, and it wasn't really true. But he said, "Next season you're going to show up and you're going to be shaved. Like they're going to shave your head, bald as a cue ball." And just the way that they said it, and some of the things they popped in there, like the 8 ball and everything, have been symbols that they've used in other seasons. So it's like I feel like they already knew enough to use those symbols in telling these stories and, hinting at things. So again, I don't know what they knew at that early, but I think at least by season 5 they knew and have known ever since then. And it's just a matter of it's taken longer than anyone thought it would, and they just kind of had to wait for it to come back around. So yeah, I think that especially Emily and Norman have known for a long time, but I think most of the major characters, I think like Andy and Denai and Maggie, Lauren Cohen, and a lot of them, I think probably Jeffrey Dean Morgan knows. I mean, I think most of them are privy to what's going on. But because it's not their arc and they are working on other aspects of the show, of course, they're never going to talk about it or anything. But remember that Jeffrey Dean Morgan and his wife, Hillary Burton, they mentioned Beth and Daryl. And I think that was very planned too. So anyway, that's my feeling on it is they've known for a long time and they're just not allowed to talk about it very much. They can only talk about what the writers tell them they can talk about. But great question. Um, very interested in Beth's potential memory issues. I wonder if they'll be fragmented and confusing, like she doesn't remember TF coming to get her at all and instead believes she was shot during her first escape attempt. Would be heartbreaking to think she believes they never tried to find her or they've given up. This delves very much into headcanon territory, but I've always been on the fence on whether she would still sing or not in the time she's gone. On the one hand, I think it would be a powerful symbol of her losing hope, but also I've imagined she would perform for whatever community she's with, and she has a song called Moonshine Man. Oh, I love that because she doesn't quite remember Daryl, but she remembers bits and pieces. Also, the last few lines of the ballad of Lucy Gray from The Hunger Games gives me very Bethyl vibes. Gonna need to hunt through the tags to find other TDR's headcanons. Yeah, I mean, I think what it comes down to is I have lots of different headcanons about this too, and we don't know exactly what way they're gonna go with it. Um, I think that there will be at least some element of feeling like either they gave up or they didn't come back for her or they left her behind. I mean, how could there not be? They're gonna have to at least address that in some way. In terms of whether she sings, I can see it going one of two ways, and I'm honestly fine with either one. So I've thought about, headcanons where she does still sing because I think that would be the most obvious thing because she said that, to Edwards, I still sing. And just in terms of who she is, especially if she's with like an enemy group and there's, at least in the show, some question about whether she's evil or not, but if she's still singing, then she still is at her core who she always was. But I've always kind of had this headcanon that, even when Daryl finds her, he's just going to be so swept up in being so happy that she's there and that she's alive and there's a million things going on. He's not really thinking too much about her singing and then have her start singing where he hears her. And, I always thought maybe she's tucking some kids in to bed and singing them a lullaby. It can be something, it doesn't have to be a performance. It can be something really subtle. And just to see what his reaction is when he hears her sing, like that would be really, really powerful. Um, on the flip side, well, another thing they could do is I've always wondered if her singing will call him to her. And I think that's kind of what you're saying about her performing for the community. It would be interesting if he heard her singing and that sort of, yeah, just, I don't know how else to say it, called him to her or, grabs him and pulls him to where she is. Anyway, that's another possibility. But I do see what you mean in terms of maybe she doesn't sing because it's a sign of her losing hope. I could see them doing that too. I could see it being like, kind of like I said in a previous video about her hair or what she wears changing and showing that she's a little bit jaded. And so maybe she hasn't sung in a long time because of that. But then when she comes back together with Daryl, she sings again. That would be really nice too. And that would be a very literal um, paying off of Daryl fixing the music box, right? We always see that. We do see it as him fixing Beth. And for the record, Sasha, Sonequa, Martin Green actually did say that Daryl was fixing little Beth. So there was a confirmation there that the music box represented Beth. And so we've kind of seen it as, maybe if she does have memory issues, he'll bring her memory back to her. So he'll fix her in that way. But it would be interesting if she didn't sing, the music box being broken was that she doesn't sing anymore. And when she comes back together with him, he, quote unquote, fixes her emotionally and then she sings again. That would be super powerful. So I'm really good with either one. I'm just, like I always say, I'm here for it. I want to see what they do with it, but I think it's going to be great either way. So yeah, thanks for sending that in. And yeah, I'm sure every single one of us, all TDers, have 15 different headcanons about this. And, there's no lack of possibility here. So thank you. All right, I'd hoped to get through my asks, but I'm not going to quite get through them this week, but I will have plenty more to talk about next week, including I'm going to talk about my water dehydration theory that I recently come to, And like I said, there's some stuff on Rome, and there's lots of stuff to talk about. So I will be back soon. Bye.